It started with screams, loud and sharp, piercing through the night, the kind that made your chest tighten and your legs freeze in place. I was there. I heard them. This is not one of those stories people tell to scare kids into behaving. This is real. I saw it with my own eyes, and I still don't know how I survived. Everyone in my village knows about the forest. They tell you never to go in. It's not just about wild animals or getting lost. It's something worse. Nobody really talks about it directly, but if someone goes in, they don't come out the same, if they come out at all. But I didn't believe the stories. I thought they were just tales to keep us from exploring too far. I was wrong. I was 17 when it happened. My cousin Kofi and I were on a dare. He was always the bold one, and I guess I didn't want to look like a coward in front of him. "Let's go see what's so special about this forest," he said that evening, grinning like it was nothing. I hesitated. You know what people say about it. "And do you believe them?" he shot back. "All these stories, they're just to scare us. Look, we'll go to the edge, maybe step inside for a bit and come back. Nobody will even know." It sounded stupid even then, but something about the way he said it made me agree. I didn't want to seem weak. We waited until nightfall. The moon was bright enough to see the path leading out of the village, but the forest itself was pitch black. Its trees stood tall and close together, like they were trying to block out the light. When we got to the edge, Kofi stopped and laughed. "See? It's just trees. Nothing's gonna happen." But the air felt wrong. It was cold, colder than it should have been for a dry season night, and quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just silence. "We shouldn't go in," I said. My voice sounded shaky, even to me. Kofi rolled his eyes. "You scared already? Fine, I'll go first." Before I could stop him, he stepped into the trees. I followed, more out of fear of being left alone than anything else. As soon as I entered, the air got heavier, like the forest was pressing down on me. I could barely hear Kofi's footsteps ahead of me. "Don't go too far," I called out. He didn't answer. "Kofi?" Still nothing. I quickened my pace, pushing through the thick bushes and vines, but it felt like the forest was shifting. Every tree looked the same, and the more I walked, the more lost I felt. Then I heard it, a low whisper. It wasn't Kofi. It came from deeper inside, from somewhere I couldn't see. The sound wrapped around me, cold and sharp, and I froze. "Kofi?" I called again, my voice barely above a whisper now. And then I saw him. He was standing still, facing away from me, his head tilted like he was listening to something. "Kofi, what are you doing?" I asked, stepping closer. I reached out to touch his shoulder, but the moment my hand made contact, he turned around. His eyes were wide, too wide, and his mouth was moving, but no words came out. Instead, that same whispering sound grew louder, filling my ears, my head, my whole body. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. "Kofi, stop it!" But he didn't respond. He just stared at me, unblinking, his face pale like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. The whispers grew louder, surrounding us. I couldn't tell where they were coming from anymore. It was like the forest itself was speaking. "Run!" Kofi finally screamed, his voice breaking through the noise. I didn't think. I just turned and ran. The forest didn't make sense. No matter which direction I ran, the trees seemed to close in around me. My legs felt like lead, and every breath burned in my chest. Behind me, I heard Kofi screaming again, but I couldn't stop. I didn't want to look back. When I finally burst out of the trees and into the village, I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. People rushed out of their homes, shouting and asking what happened, but I couldn't speak. All I could do was point to the forest. "Kofi," I whispered. They sent a search party the next morning, but they didn't find him. Not Kofi, not his body, not even his footprints. It was like the forest had swallowed him whole. After that night, things were never the same. People in the village avoided me. They said I brought bad luck, that I was cursed. But the truth is, I still hear the whispers. Every night, when the wind blows through the trees, I hear them calling my name. And sometimes when I look into the forest, I see Kofi, or what's left of him. After Kofi disappeared, the elders held a meeting. They sat in a circle under the big baobab tree in the center of the village, whispering amongst themselves. I wasn't invited, but I stood nearby, pretending not to listen. "It's the curse," one of them said. "The forest is angry." Another nodded. "We told them not to go near it. That place is forbidden for a reason." "What do we do about the boy?" someone else asked, referring to me. I held my breath, waiting for the answer. "Leave him," the chief finally said. His voice was low, but it carried. "If the forest wanted him, it would have taken him too. But mark my words, he's tied to this now. He can't escape it." Those words stayed with me, tied to this. I didn't know what they meant, but I felt it deep in my bones. For weeks, the village avoided me. Kids I used to play with ran away when they saw me. Women turned their faces when I passed. Even my mother kept her distance, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. Fear, maybe, or shame. At night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the whispers. They were faint, almost like the rustling of leaves, but they never stopped. Sometimes I thought I heard my name. Other times it sounded like Kofi's voice, calling for help. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to go back. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it was all in my head. Or maybe I just wanted answers. I waited until everyone in the house was asleep, then slipped out quietly. The moon was high, lighting the path to the forest. It looked the same as it did that night, dark and uninviting. My legs shook as I approached, but I kept going. When I stepped into the forest, the air changed immediately. It was colder, heavier. The trees seemed closer together, their branches twisting like claws. "Kofi?" I called, my voice trembling. The whispers started again, soft and distant. I followed them, stepping carefully over roots and fallen leaves. The deeper I went, the louder they became, until it felt like they were coming from all around me. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was Kofi. He was standing in a clearing, his back to me. "Kofi!" I cried, running toward him. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't him. It was something else. The figure was tall and thin, its body twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Its skin was dark and rough, like tree bark, and its arms were too long, dangling almost to the ground. It turned to look at me, and I froze. Its face, it didn't have one. Just a smooth, featureless surface where its eyes and mouth should have been. The whispers grew louder, and I realized they were coming from it. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then it spoke, not with a voice, but inside my head. "Leave," it said. "This is not your place." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. "You took Kofi," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "Where is he?" The thing tilted its head, almost like it was curious. "He belongs to us now." I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was standing there, frozen in fear, and the next I was stumbling out of the forest, my lungs burning and my heart pounding. When I got back to the village, I collapsed at the edge of the path. A few people saw me and came running, but I couldn't explain what had happened. The chief came later, standing over me with a grim expression. "You went back," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded weakly. He sighed, shaking his head. "You don't understand what you've done. The forest doesn't forgive." After that, things got worse. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder, following me everywhere I went. Sometimes I saw shadows moving in the corner of my eye. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. The village began to suffer too. Crops started failing. Livestock went missing. People got sick with fevers that no medicine could cure. And every time something went wrong, they looked at me. "It's his fault," they whispered. "The forest cursed him, and now we're all paying for it." One night they came for me. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when I heard the footsteps. A group of men burst into the house, dragging me outside before I could even scream. My mother tried to stop them, but they pushed her away. "We have to end this," one of them said. "If we don't, the forest will destroy us all." They tied my hands and dragged me toward the trees. I begged them to stop, but they wouldn't listen. When we reached the edge of the forest, they threw me down and left me there. "If the forest wants you, let it take you," one of them said before they turned and walked away. I sat there for hours, too afraid to move. The whispers came again, louder than ever, and the shadows began to creep closer. I thought I was going to die. But then something strange happened. The shadows stopped, the whispers faded, And for the first time, I heard Kofi's voice. "Run," he said, just like before. "Run and don't look back." So I did. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. When I looked back, the forest was gone. Not just the trees, the entire forest. It was like it had never been there. But I know it's still out there waiting, and I know I'll never escape it.